the splendor of a king, clothed in majesty. Let all the earth rejoice, all the earth rejoice. He wraps himself in light, and darkness tries to hide, and trembles at his voice, and trembles at his voice. How great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God? And all will see how great is our God. Age to age he stands, and time is in his hands, beginning and the end, beginning and the end. The God that three in one, Father, Spirit, Son, the Lion and the Lamb, the Lion and the Lamb. How great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God? And all will see how great is our God. How great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God? And all will see how great is our God. Name above all names, worthy of all praise. My heart will sing, how great is our God. Name above all names, worthy of all praise. And my heart will sing, how great is our God. How great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God? And all see how great is our God. How great is our God? Oh, sing with me, how great is our God? And you'll see how great is our God. And how great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God? And all will see how great is our God. How great is our God? Oh, sing with me, how great is our God? And all will see how great is our God. is our God. Sing with me, how great is our God. And oh, we'll see how great is our God. How great is our God. And sing with me, how great is our God. Oh, we'll see how great is our God. How great is our God. How great is our God. How great is our God.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you again for joining us this Sunday and the second session as we started a series last week called Believing God for the Comeback from Our Setbacks. A new report from one of the business magazines says that COVID-19 pandemic has caused historic setbacks in global health. In only half a year, the coronavirus pandemic has wiped out decades of global development in everything from health to the economy. Progress is not only stopped, but has regressed in areas like getting people out of poverty and improving conditions for women and children all around the world. This pandemic has caused major setbacks in the economy, in education, and business globally. Many business owners today and investors, both small and in a corporate level, had expressed tremendous loss in their business that closing is their only option and their only way out. Today, we're going to look at what do you do when your setback seems irreversible. You just think that the door is totally closed and it's never going to open again. What do you do when your setback appears to be permanent, that it is irreversible, and you think, I'm never going to climb out of this? Many people today feels that way. Many of you who's been greatly affected by this pandemic are probably thinking in those lines. Now, the answer to that question is found in the life of a man in the Bible named Job. There's a book in the Bible named after him, almost in the middle of the Bible. Now, I want to give you a little background about Job. And like what I said last week, this whole series is going to be looking at common people in the Bible, like people in the Bible who's gone through setbacks after setbacks, and how God has helped them out of it, and how God has brought a comeback from their setbacks. Now, I'd like to say this. We learned this last week, and I'll say this. You might say, well, that was during Bible times, Pastor Phoebe. We're in a modern time. We're in a digital time. I want to let you know this. One of the principles in studying the Bible is to look at what was written before and gain and learn some life principles that are applicable for today. Now, what we're going to talk about, by the way, this morning is about this guy named Job and how he weathered all the setbacks and what really happens when God gave him the comeback for his setbacks. Now, back in his days, Job was the wealthiest man in the world. He was very powerful, very famous, very important, very influential. But on one single day, he literally lost everything. I know, right? We've been in this pandemic for about 9 months now. But in this situation, he lost everything in one day. Every one of his sons and daughters, he had a very big family, were murdered by terrorists on a single day. Now that's enough right there, right? But then if you continue in this story, natural disaster wiped out all his crops and all his livestock. They all died on a single day. It was a major catastrophic disaster. And then what's next? You'd be okay, right? If everything was taken away from you, but he lost his wealth and he became deathly ill with an incurable and extremely painful disease. Like, really, is this even true? Read the book of Job. Everything went wrong in his life. This was a catastrophic disaster. Now, I don't know if you can relate to that. Maybe some of you say, Pastor, I can relate to that. Now, that to me is a real setback, and it seemed like it would be irreversible. At least in human thinking, you would say, okay, that's irreversible. He lost all his children. That cannot be reversed. And true. And here's how Jacob expressed his situation. On top of your outline in Job chapter 30, verse 26 and 27, here's what he says. I looked for good to come, but evil came instead. And I waited for some light, but darkness fell instead. And the churning inside of me, you know that feeling when you feel like my guts are getting ripped up? That's exactly what Job said. He said, and the churning inside of me never stopped, and waves of misery crash over me. I'd like to say this. I have no doubt that many people today, whether you're a business owner, whether I don't know what kind of field you're in, are feeling exactly like Job because of the current crisis we are facing today. And yet, when you look at the life of Job, when you really finish the whole story, at the end of the story of the book of Job, he has one of the greatest comeback in history. He loses it all, his health, his wealth, his family, everything, posterity and his prestige, lost it all. But at the end, he gains it all back, and even in an amazing, greater way. Now, this story is going to be an encouragement to you, no matter what kind of setback you're facing today in life. Or maybe you're saying, I don't have a setback. Everything is going as planned in my life. That's great. But I'd like to encourage you to keep this handy because, like what I said, sometimes there's 3 places we can be. We're either coming out of a crisis, we are in a crisis, or we're about to go into a crisis. You're going to need this someday if you don't need it right now. These are the 5 things that Job did to trust God for a comeback when his setback seems so irreversible. So what do you do? What do we do? What do we do when we've been devastated by something so big and we think, I'm never going to get out of this? Let's look at what Job do. First, tell God exactly how I feel. That's what Job did. He told God exactly what he feels. And that's where we need to start. When you've got a major setback, you start by unloading your emotions on God. Now, the first thing you do when you're in pain, you tell God exactly what you feel and how you feel. Can I say this? You don't tell him how you think you ought to feel. You don't tell him how you should feel. Or you don't apologize for your emotion. You don't tell what would be right to feel at the moment. You tell him exactly what is going on in your heart. You tell him exactly how you feel. Here's the point, folks. You cannot be completely open and honest with someone you do not trust. Did you know that when God listens to you, He wants you to be honest? And that when you are honest to God about your emotion, that's actually an act of worship from you. Now notice Job's reaction to the disaster in his life. Look how he expressed it. In Job chapter 1, verse 20 says this about Job. Job stood up, he tore his robe in grief. Now that, by the way, is a Middle Eastern custom. Second, what did he do? He shaved his head. That's another Middle Eastern custom back in the days. And then what did he do? He fell to the ground and worshiped God. What is Job doing here? He's acting in total humility, and yet he's in despair and in doubt and in frustration and in anger. Friends, can I say this? Anytime you have a loss in your life, any kind of loss that happens in your life, there's four emotions that is just raging within you. You're going to have anger. You're going to ask this question, why did this happen to me? Why me? And then you're going to have grief. What have I lost? And then you're going to go through a shock. Like, what is going on here? I don't understand. I can't believe this is going on. And then you're going to face fear. What's going to happen now? What's going to happen next? And you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if many of us are going through all those emotions and questions in our life today. And you know what? You know what you need to do with those emotions? You need to be able to express every one of those emotions to God. You don't need to hold it in there. And that's the reason why someone said, oh, people are going to mental stress because we have all these pent-up emotions. And I know it's very hard for men to accept and to admit, like, okay, I'm afraid of this. I might lose my job. Okay, I'm really struggling with fear. And many of us do not want to admit that. But Job told God exactly how he feels. Let me tell you a little secret. And for those of you, some of you know this already, but some of you, you are new to this. Can I say this and remind you? God can handle any emotions you've got. Any emotion. And you know why? Because He gave them to you. The only reason you and I have any feelings, you have any emotion, is because you and I were made in the image of God. And the reason you have emotion is because God have emotion. If you want to read the scripture, if you want to know what emotions God has, read through Scripture. All those emotions came from Him, and He can handle those emotions. He can handle your anger, your doubts. He can handle your complaint, all of that, right? In fact, Job was brutally honest with God in Job 7:11 when he says this, I can't be quiet. I am angry and I have to speak. Now, if you read the book of Job, you will actually see the progression in his reaction, his emotion to his catastrophic setback, where he literally lost everything and he was so devastated. First, he expressed confusion. What is going on in my life? Ever felt like that? Today, many people are feeling like that. I have that question, what's going on around the world? And then he starts complaining, and then he starts blaming God for all his pain. And at one point, he's saying, God, you didn't do this right. You handled this all wrong. You let all this bad stuff happen to me, God, and I'm a righteous man. I trust you. I don't like it. Or I like you. I don't really like you right now, God. Well, did you know that God handled all the emotions of Job? Job even went as far as really throwing a lot of questions on God. You know what, folks? I think for some of us who's been holding these emotions for maybe 9 months, why don't you try being serious? Why don't you try being honest with God and tell God exactly what's going on in your heart? Job never stopped trusting God. Even when he was angry, even when he was so upset, even when he didn't understand what was going on in his life, when he was confused, when he had doubt, even when he thought God had messed up his life, he still kept trusting God. But he was just honest about his true feelings. Now, I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, I heard someone who said this: you should never question God. But when I read the narratives of the various heroes of faith, they ask God questions. They question God. Out of their frustration and pain, they question God's power, His plan, His ways, His mercy, His love. And yet God didn't wipe them out. Now the Bible gives us a lot of example of many godly people who expressed their frustration to God. One time there was a guy named Jeremiah. He was a prophet. He gets so upset at what God did, right? He said, God, you have deceived me. He's a prophet. And he said, God, I think you lied to me, God. Things haven't turned out the way you told me they were going to turn out. And I'm really, really upset. God allows that to be recorded in the Bible. Another time there was a woman named Naomi, and things didn't go well for her. And she said, you know what? Call me bitter, because God has made my life bitter. It's in the Bible too, right? Another time there's a guy named David who says, Lord, I've taken the words from you and I've taken all that you can give me, and I'm done. I'm fed up. I've had it, God. And God says, you're a man after my own heart. Are you kidding me? You know, there's another guy in the Bible, and his name is SETBACK. And this is actually the guy who kind of like, wow, I read his book. I'm like, wait, he questioned God big time. Questions I'm asking inside my heart. He had the same problem, and Habakkuk wrote a little short book near the end of the Old Testament, and it's really only 3 chapters. And you can summarize the whole book in one word. With one word, why? Why, God? Why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to your people? Why did you allow this? If you've ever felt that question, why is this happening to me? Habakkuk would be a good book to read for you. Now, these people were trusting God to handle their emotion, and Job did that too. Now, although he expressed his fear and his questions and his frustration and his doubt, he says, I am still going to trust you, God. Lord, even though I don't understand it, or even though you wiped out everything in my life, I'm going to do exactly what you're telling me to do, even though I feel like blowing it all off. I'm going to tell you how I feel, because I know, God, you can handle that. Can I say this? During this global setback, many people are expressing their anger and frustration through social media. They protest. Some people choose to internalize their frustration, resulting with all kinds of psychosomatic illnesses. The question I ask you is this: what frustration have you never talked about? Let me ask you that question again. What frustration have you never talked about? You've never talked to God about it, much less you haven't talked to a counselor about it. You haven't asked help. That frustration at work, that frustration in your marriage, frustration in your finances, in your body, that frustration in the relationship or a friendship with your parents. I don't know. Can I say this? Try God. God can handle all that emotion. The first step, folks, to trusting God on the road to comeback is to tell Him exactly how you feel. Now, the second way to trust God for a comeback when everything looks fatal, everything looks final, and no way out, is to refuse to become bitter. Refuse to become bitter. Now, can I say this? It is okay to tell God you're mad. You're sad, you're angry, you're depressed, you're just frustrated, God. God, why? It's okay to say that. But you should never allow that grief or frustration or worry to turn into resentment and bitterness. Now, Job, in spite of all his expression of frustration to God, Job did not get bitter. In Job 1:21-22, he says this: when everything bad happened to him, he said this. Now notice what he said. I came naked from my mother's womb, and I shall have nothing when I die. He says, the Lord gave me everything I had, and they were His to take away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And it says this, in all of this. Now notice that. I'd like for you to circle that, underline that. In all of this, Job did not sin by blaming God. Well, Pastor Phoebe, what about all those things he complained about? That was an expression of his emotion. This is how intimate Job was with God. This is how personal Job was with God. He felt safe with God, expressing all the negative things that he's going on in her life. You know, if you were to study the book of Job, you'd find that the main question of the book is, will you love God and will you trust God no matter what happened to you? That's the main question. Why do you worship God? Why do you love God? Why do you serve God? Is it only when things are good? Or will you love God and serve God no matter what happens? If you come to this level like Job did, will you be like Job to say, God, I hate all this, but no matter what, God, I will trust you. Now, how do you trust God when your heart is breaking? How do you put your eyes on God when they're filled with tears? Well, the antidote to bitterness really is not just to say, I don't want to be bitter. I don't want to be bitter. No. The antidote to bitterness is to remind ourselves of the facts of life. You know why? Because when all these things, when you have a setback, immediately reality begins to change. Your mind, your thinking and your understanding becomes very polarized. And it is very important to remind ourselves of the facts of life, the fact of who God is. Now, Job talks about these things in his book. In the middle of his catastrophic disaster in his life, Job had to remind himself these facts that not only strengthen him, but stabilizes not only his emotions, but most especially is his mind, his mental health. Now, I'd like to say this. In this pandemic and quarantine, millions of people are mentally struggling. Why? There are no clear answers. There are no deadlines, not enough resources to sustain them during this crisis. And here are some facts of life that Job said, I'm going to hang on this no matter what I'm going through, because it's going to keep my heart soft. It's going to keep me from being bitter. This is what Job says. This is what he said. He said this, no matter what happens, these facts will always be true. One fact that I have to remember, Job said, and I think you and I need to remember, is God will never stop loving me. Friends, that is a big deal. Second to remember is God has a plan for my life. Regardless of what's going on in the pandemic, God's plan is never going to be altered. This is going to work into God's plan, right? And then third is I need to remember that God cares about every detail of my life and your life. Every detail. God, the fourth one I need to remember as a fact of life of who God is God is in control of things even though I don't understand it. And we talked about this last week. God is in control. It's not politics. It's not the president. It's not anybody else. God is in control of things even when I don't understand it. And last, this is what Job said. This is what Job believed. And it's in your outline, including the verses. God will protect me. Job said, I'm sick right now and everybody left me, but I know God will protect me. Now, those are the things that you and I need to build our life on when we don't understand why things are happening in our life. You know, earlier I mentioned about a guy named Habakkuk. In the first 3 chapters of that book, all he did was ask God question after question. Well, look at this verse on your outline in Habakkuk chapter 3, verse 17 and 18. Here's what Habakkuk did when he had a setback and looked like it was going to be irreversible. Look at what he said. I love this. He said, even though the fig leaves have no fruit and no grapes grow in the vine, and even though the olive crop fails and the field produce no grain, and even though the sheep all die and the cattle stalls are empty. What is he saying there? He's saying even though everything in my life is a disaster, notice what he says in the last part of that verse. He says this, I will be joyful and glad because the Lord God is my Savior. Let me ask you this. What's gotten you bitter lately? What are you bitter about today? What is some bitterness that you've allowed to take root in your life? Now, I said it earlier, bitterness is a poison, folks. Bitterness destroys. It will eat you alive. It will lower your immune system. And yes, maybe because your immune system is low. Yes, you can get COVID. Yes, you can get all kinds of viruses in your life. It's like a cancer that will take over your life. Friends, can I remind you that bitterness is a choice that you are going to need to either keep or let go. Now, here's the third step in trusting God. When you want to have a comeback from the setback that seems irreversible, you need to unite with other people who will help me focus on God. You need to unite with other people who will help you and me focus on God. Now, I want you to get this because this is very important. For any comeback, you're going to need other people with faith to back you up. Not just any other people. We all have many friends. We all have connections with many people. But you need those people in your life. Maybe 3 or 4 or even 2 people in your life who has the faith to back you up. You're going to need people in your life who can actually believe God when you're losing your faith. Believe God for you when your faith is start being shaky, when you are going through a setback in your life. There are all kinds of crazy voices out there going on in your mind and even outside of you. All kinds of voices from people around you, even friends and family, that literally is not helping you build your faith. You will need to find those people of faith you can connect with. And this is why, can I say this? I said this 2 weeks ago. You need a church home, a church family, a life group, a small group of believers that meets for regular connection and regular fellowship. They will be your safety net when your setback happens to your life. Friends, can I say this and listen good? God never intended for you to go through this pandemic on your own. God has never intended for you to go through life on your own. More yet, in the difficult times, the setbacks of life, He never intended you to go through grief or sorrow or tragedy or loss or marriage problems or difficulty, financial setbacks by yourself. He made us for each other. I need you and you need me. He wired human beings, folks, like you and me, to need each other. That's our specs. That's how we're wired. We are better together and we are stronger together and we are better in community. But here's the problem, folks, and let's just be honest. When you and I have setbacks, or I have a setback, you have a setback, when we're going through pain, or suffering, or sorrow, or sadness, or loss, or conflict. The problem is this: the natural reaction to pain is to withdraw. Withdraw from others, to pull back. You say, that's not me. Oh, I can go there. And sometimes I see myself. When I am in deep pain, I don't even want Max around me. I don't want my kids around me. Sometimes I would drive out and just sit and just have a moment with God. And I mean, maybe 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, maybe even a day, yes. That's good. Maybe to be alone, to kind of reflect and think through what was going on at that moment. But for you to withdraw constantly and pull back, we build walls around ourselves. We want to hide in our shell. We build a shelf, and then we want to put up barriers around us. We want to keep people at a distance. We don't want anybody to be close to us when we are in deep, deep pain. And God says to you and me, no, no, no. That's not how I created you, and that's not how healing is going to happen. That's not how a comeback is going to happen in your setback. That's the exact opposite of what you need to do. One of Job's friends gave this wise advice to Job. Notice there in your outline, his name was Elihu. And in Job 36:18, he says this to Job: Job, don't let your anger and pain that you've endured make you sneer at God. Reputation and riches cannot protect you from distress, nor can you find safety in the dark world below. He's talking about the occult there, the dark world below, right? So he said, don't turn to evil as a way of escape. God's power is unlimited. Wow. How many of you would like to have friends like that? He's saying God's power is unlimited. Job, others have praised God for what he has done. Now join them in praising God. Now, if you are taking notes, I encourage you to circle that phrase, join with them. Join with them. What his friend is saying, hey, Job, other people have praised God. Go and join with them. He said, that's how you're going to make it to the next step. You got to unite with other people who are going to support you, encourage you, pray for you, pick you up, hold you up, maybe even carry you through that difficult setback you've had. They'll help you out. Can I say this? I know we're going through this pandemic and we're called to isolate ourselves, self-distancing. But you know what? Thank God for technology. I said this last Sunday. Hey, make good use of technology and social media. Reach out, let people know, hey, I need help. I'm going through a lot and I can't handle this anymore. Anybody out there, I just want to say this, try that and see what happens. Now, where do you find those kind of people? Where do you find those kind of friends who will lift you up when you're down? Well, a couple of places I'd like to say, especially if you're a follower of Jesus Christ. First, you find them at local churches, right? It's where people gather, where people of faith gather. That's why, by the way, for those of you who are watching online, I want to actually encourage you to come to one of the church services, maybe closest to your home. When we open already, find a local church. Find a church family. You're always welcome to come to People's Church anytime we have a session. But if you find us too far and you feel like, I have a problem with women pastors, okay, there's a lot of great male pastors out there who is full of love, who is just great, amazing speaker, and they want to connect with you. But you've got to find those places. There's about a dozen more benefits that you're going to have when you actually go to a live session. Now, the second place that you find them, basically, and which we encourage you to do, is connect with a small group, connect with a life group that meets on a weekly basis. A lot of our life group are meeting online. They're meeting on either Zoom or Messenger, or maybe you're in an office, a dorm room, or maybe somewhere out there where you have a community, a small group of people. You can go to a park, maybe 4 or 5 people, 3 or 4 or 5 people, go to a park and then begin to share and begin to just encourage each other. Now in Philippians chapter 1 in the Bible, verse 19, Paul talks about the benefit of having people pray for you in a small group. And he says this to the Philippian Christians. He says this, because you're praying for me and the Spirit of Christ is helping me, I know this trouble will bring my freedom. I'd like for you to circle that word freedom. What is Paul talking about here? He's saying that the prayer is the path back to your comeback, right? Prayer is the path back to your comeback. Can I say this? There is an inner strength that surges in your spirit when you have 2 or 3 people coming around you and praying for you, and they lay their hands on you. Now, I know we're not doing that right now, but did you know one of the things I missed so much during the time of my dad's ministry was those moments when he would ask people to, if you have a need, if you are broken right now, please stand, come to the altar, and we'll have people who wants to pray for you. And you know what? I'd like to say this. I miss those moments. Because you know what? There were many times when I stood up in this altar and I had people lay their hands on me, and man, I felt the presence. And no, it's not a weird presence. And maybe say, Pastor Phoebe, you're just too emotional. Okay, maybe call it emotional. But I've talked to some people and said, you know what, Pastor Phoebe? They said, when those people lay hands on me, it was like something, I don't know, there's like a power that surges inside me that is so warm and it's so comforting, it's so peaceful. Now, I don't know where you are in your spiritual journey, but you need to unite with people of the same faith. You need people, people who will pray for you and people who will back you up. Now, here's the fourth step that Job did. He surrendered his future to God. I need to surrender. You need to surrender your future to God. This is exactly what Job did in his comeback. Anytime you have a loss, anytime you have a failure or setback, what paralyzes you after that is actually not grief. Grief is actually a good thing. What paralyzes you is fear. It's fear of the future. Sometimes when you had a setback, people will give you the wrong advice. And that makes you more fearful. I don't know about you, but yesterday I was just talking to our production guy before the session today. Yesterday I got this alert. Many of you who has iPhone maybe got the alert, emergency alert, COVID alert. And I remember when I got that, there was this eerie feeling like, wow. Now, I don't know if, it could be true, it could be false, I don't know, maybe it's true, okay? And it's an advice, we should take heed. But sometimes people give us the wrong advice. And those advice can come from friends. They can even come from trusted people, even family members who love you. Why? Because sometimes people make mistakes in their advice. They're not perfect. They can give us the wrong advice. Now, in Job's case, he got some bad advice, not from his friends, but the person closest to him. Think about that. Anybody can guess? Right, his wife. And in Job chapter 2, verse 9, here's what happened. Job's wife, read that with me in your outline. Job's wife said to him, "Are you still trying to maintain your integrity? Why don't you just curse God and die? Just end it. Are you serious?" Out of all the closest and most intimate people in Job's life came the worst advice. If you read that, I think that is the first advice to suicide, right? His wife, like, Job, kill yourself. Are you going to maintain your integrity? Now, wow. I don't know what I would feel if Max did that to me. But notice what Job replies to his wife. He said this, "You talk like a godless woman. Should we accept only good things from the hands of God and never anything bad?" So in all this, Job said nothing. Wow, good advice. Man, just real quick. When your women start babbling and start saying all negative things, the best thing is to just say nothing. Don't say anything wrong. Quiet. Just quiet. Walk out. Let her talk her life out. Let her be negative until she falls asleep and she gets tired. Go to your room. Pray, say, "God, deal with that woman right now," right? And God will. Now notice Job's response to the problem. The setback in his life that seemed irreversible is complete and total surrender to God. In fact, in Job 13, he says one of the most famous verses in the Bible where he says this, and read that with me. He says, "Even if God takes my life, I will trust him. Though he slays me, I will trust him." Friends, I don't know what you call that, but to me, that is total, complete surrender. That is abundant surrender to God. No matter what happens in my life, I may not understand it, but I belong to God, and I know those things that are true, that God made me, he loves me, and his love is not conditional. He has my best interest in his heart. I know that God is in control. I know that this life is not all there is, and I know there's more to this life than just here and now. I know that one day I'm going to eternally be with God forever, where there's no more pain, there's no more tears and sorrow. These are the things that give you and I hope and comfort when we lost everything. Friends, my friends, that is the ultimate expression of a mature faith. How mature is your faith? By the way, how do you know when you've got a weak faith? Do you know that what the sign of a weak faith is? One word: worry. Worry, worry, worry. Worry is a warning light that your faith is weak. Worry is a warning light that you really are not trusting God like you believe you are, or what you say you are. I trust God. The moment you start worrying, you've lost that trust, right? Matthew 6:32 in the CEV translation says this. It says, people who don't know God are always what? Worrying. There you go. People who don't know God are always worrying. When you have a setback in your life, listen, you're either going to worry or you're going to worship. It's a choice that you have to make. Worry or worship. And the more you focus your life on God, the less you're going to worry during a setback. Now, I want you to see the fifth and final step of what Job did in order to reverse basically that setback in his life. And this is important for those of you who are type A personality, who wants to know all the details. You've got to trust Jesus for every details of my comeback. You have to trust Jesus for every detail of your life, for Him to turn back the setback into a comeback. Friends, if you look at the narratives of the life of everyone in the scripture who have received a comeback from their setbacks, there is one common thread that weaves through their lives and their story. When God gave them a vision or a plan or an idea or a project, God never gave them the details of how, when, and where He was going to fulfill that project or that mission or that idea and that project. He will always sometimes start with a what. Sometimes He'll start with a what. And then He'll wait for you to do something about the what that He's spoken to you before He unfolds the next step. And I know for many people, that's so frustrating. God, if you would just give me a full bird's eye view, a full spread of what you want me to do, then it'll be easier for me to follow. Why can't you give me the full spread, God? You know why He's not giving you the full spread? You will never walk by faith. And when you don't walk by faith, the Bible says without faith, it is impossible to please God, right? That's not pleasing to God. Now I want you to look at what Jesus promised in John 16:33. He says this, read that with me. He said, by trusting me, you will be unshakable and assured, deeply at peace. In this world, you will continue to experience difficulties. But He said this, take heart, because I have overcome the world. Friends, that's a promise from Jesus Christ. And that is the path back to your comeback. Now, this is exactly what Job did when he lost everything. He lost his family, he lost his health, his wealth, his prestige, power, influence. He trusted God for the details. And God engineered the greatest comeback in history. Very, very, very big comeback in Job's life. Now look at the last verse on your outline. It's Job 42:10. The story ends like this. Read that with me. After Job prayed for his friends. Now why was he doing that? That's another story. The so-called friends kind of flipped on him, but that's another story. Now, it says there, after Job prayed for his friends, the Lord gave him success again. In fact, keep reading, the Lord restored to Job twice as much of everything that he had been blessed before. Are you kidding me? Twice as much of everything that he had been blessed before. Think about that. I mean, to me, it was like, wow, if he was the richest man at that time, the wealthiest man, God returns twice as much more of what he was blessed before. To me, that is like beyond. I was like, wow, God, you sure have a way, a grand way of doing things. That's a comeback. God doubles what he lost in the setback because God is faithful. God is true. And Job had trusted God's goodness. He trusted God in the details. He didn't come to God and said, now God, okay, so I'm really sick and you left me this nagging woman, sure, not helping me. All my friends also turned away from me. So God, how are you supposed to do this comeback? No, in all that, the Bible says Job remained trusting God till the very end. I don't know what your setback is in your life. I don't know what kind of setback you are facing in your life at this moment. I just want to say this. Don't lose hope. Don't let it destroy and devastate you at this moment. As a matter of fact, you watching this session this morning, whether you're a member, you're a guest, or you just happen to tune in, or you just kind of are curious, wherever you are, I really believe in my heart nothing happens in our life by accident. God allowed you to watch this session because God wants to do a comeback in your life. Whatever setback you have, in your business, in your finances, in your marriage, in your career, I don't know, in your health. One thing I know, and I can stake my life on this, God wants to do a comeback in your life. But you've got to turn to the right person, and that person, my friend, is Jesus Christ. Tell him exactly what you follow what Job did. And the reason why I have so much confidence in saying this is because this is not my word. This is not my principle. This is a proven God principle. And friends, can I say this? God has a proven record since day one. He always fulfills what he says. You might not like it, and that's the reason why you've got to trust his ways. You've got to trust him in working the details of the comeback in your life. But one thing I can guarantee you is this. If you stay there and if you trust him, the comeback will always be bigger than your setback. Would you bow your heads as we close together? Those of you who are watching online, just bow your head. And first, tell God exactly how you feel about what's going on in your life. Tell him, God, I'm sad. God, I'm scared. God, I'm lonely. I am really mad. I'm frustrated. God, I'm about to quit. I'm doubting. Maybe some of you are saying, God, I'm really angry right now. I'm starting to get bitter and I'm starting to get resentful. Tell God whatever you're feeling right now. Just do that. Be honest to God about the setback, the problems that you're facing. And with your head still bowed, I like to encourage you to now tell God, say, God, I'm going to refuse to be bitter. Maybe some of you will say, God, forgive me. I was bitter in the first place. I started getting bitter. I'm angry. Say, God, I know what happened was not good, but you are a good God, and you have my best at hand. So I'm going to trust your goodness, even in the bad that's happening in my life right now. Just do that. And then say this, God, I haven't been faithful to you in worship. I haven't been faithful to you in connecting with other believers. I haven't been faithful to you, God, by connecting with my church family, with my life group. But I want to be. I want to unite with others. If you don't have a church home, say this quietly to God. Say, God, please lead me to the right church where I can get connected with other people who can help me in my faith. Say that to God and he'll lead you. And then say in your prayer, say this, and I think we all need to say this. God, I surrender my entire future to you. In this pandemic, I surrender my business. I surrender my marriage. I surrender my career. Students, say this, God, I surrender my education. I surrender my complete future to you. I don't know what it is, God, but I surrender, and I am not going to worry about it. And finally, I think we all need to pray this. Say, God, Jesus, I'm going to trust you with the details of my comeback. I'm going to let you be the driver. I'm going to let you be the captain of my boat. I'm going to give you full control, Lord, of every area of my life. I trust you, Jesus, for my comeback. I look at my situation today and it's just, to me, it seems irreversible, God. Everything is going down the tube. But I'm going to trust you, Jesus, for my future. And I'm going to trust you to get me out of this mess. I'm giving you all the boats in my life. I'm giving you my ship and all the other boats in this ship. Father, I know that you heard our prayer. And I ask you to bless every one of us. Give us a sense, God, that you heard the prayers as we all begin to take the next step to our comeback in life. Some of you might need to pray a prayer like this because this is all new to you. And you're saying, how can I trust a God? I don't know. I don't know if I'm even connected to him. Why don't you just where you are, pray this prayer quietly. Say, God, I don't know if I can trust you because I really don't know you personally. But this morning, I realize I need you. I need that kind of safety net. I need that kind of safe place where I can be real with somebody. And God, I heard this morning that I can be safe with you. I can be transparent and honest with you. So God, I open my life to you and I accept your Son, Jesus Christ, in my life. I accept this life that he offers me. I accept this relationship. I accept this life that allows me to connect with you in a deeper and personal way. God, forgive me for ignoring you all my life. I ask you to come in, Jesus. Take over every area of my boat, of my life. And beginning today, I want to believe and I want to trust you. Some of you might honestly say, God, I really still have a lot of questions. But I know I'm taking my first step of faith, of just accepting you in my life and saying, I want a personal relationship with you, Jesus Christ. In your name I pray. Amen. Thank you so much again for joining us today. And I just like to say this. I don't know about you, but I am struggling with all the things that are going on here. And I'm just hanging on. I said, God, I don't understand it. I don't know what to believe. But Lord, I know you're in control. So I'm going to ask you to do the same. Let's be patient. Let's cooperate. And really, instead of spreading negativity in our homes, our children hears it. Everybody hears it. Why don't we tell each other, hey, we're going to weather this. We're going to make it through this Christmas, through this big season of the year. We're going to make it. It might be different. It might be unique, but we're going to hold hands and we're going to allow our love to see us through this difficult time. And like what I said last week, folks, call each other. Text each other, send messages. Oh my goodness, I never send Christmas cards, but this year I think I want to start sending Christmas cards just to stay connected. And so I'd like to say this, wherever you are in this journey, hey, I'm praying for you. And thank you for giving me your ear. Thank you for giving me a moment where I can encourage you. If you find it in your heart to connect with me, to email me, my email address is on the website. You can connect with me. If you need any prayer, hey, we have prayer going on. We have a very intense prayer group that is praying for our need. Please let us know. You can send your prayers to the link and just say, hey, pray for me. Connect with us. Here's also another thing I'd like to say. I know that when you watch on Sunday morning, you see a chat on the side. Hey, that would be an encouragement to us. If you just say, hey, I'm watching from here, I'm watching from this place, just give us a thumbs up, give us a way of knowing that you're out there, and we would really appreciate this. Can I say this? It's been tough. It's been really tough in the last 9 months. Many of you do not know, but I taped this in an empty church. And I thank God for our production crew. But I'd like to say this, it would really encourage us to help us hear from you. Let us know that whatever we're doing here is making a difference in your life. And at least, I don't know, maybe opening questions in your mind and allowing you to really think through this. So anyways, I'd like to say thank you again for giving us an ear. I'll see you next Sunday. And like always, I love you all, and may God safely protect us. Let joy and peace rule our hearts, friends. And follow through all the announcements that we have online. We're going to have a very special Christmas celebration online, and we'll tell you the details on that. I believe that's going to be in the website. So stay in tune and stay connected. May God bless you.
Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you, oh, we live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you, oh, we live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save.